Hi, my name is Cathy Ripmaster. I'm a physical therapist, and today I'm going to talk to you about the MPS, the multiple positional saddle that's used with the dynamic pacer, or it could be used with the standard frame of the pacer. Today I have all the prompts stripped off of the pacer except for just the arm platforms. You can use the MPS with a chest prompt. You can use it with any type of arm prompts that you need to. And you would use this for individuals who need full support for weight bearing. It is also used for individuals who have significant postural challenges, ataxia, and spasticity. There's lots of easy adjustments so that you can get their pelvis in just the right position. And it provides a lot of different adjustments to control the pelvis. It is a support for people who scissor that might not like the ankle or the thigh prompts. And it may make easier transfers because you can actually lower the frame, put a person in a chair, and slide them onto the seat of the MPS. I have found some students that absolutely love the MPS, and I have ones that absolutely hate the MPS. So I think that some of their discomfort in the MPS might have to do with the way that I have it positioned. And I hope that you will take the time to explore some of these changes and the MPS that you can make to help make your individual more comfortable when they're in the pacer. Highly suggest you getting into the pacer yourself and make the adjustments along with me during the video. You can also, once you're done watching the video, put yourself in the position on the MPS that you see the individual that you're working with in. Is it that the frame is too high? Is it that their pelvis isn't squared up? Is it that their pelvis is too far forward? Are they too far forward on the seat? There's a lot of things to look at when you're problem solving on how you can make adjustments. But the best way to do that is to actually get into the pacer yourself and make those adjustments on yourself so you know what it feels like. You know what it feels like to be fully supported on the seat for 20-30 minutes at a time. You may make some adjustments different knowing how that feels. You may have a male colleague versus a female colleague get in the pacer and make adjustments so you know how that feels for the individual you're working on. I would first like to talk to you about taking the MPS on and off. So when you take it on and off, I highly suggest having the whole seat lowered. So once you lower your frame and you lower the seat so that you can have easy access to the buttons, I like to get on one knee. You push the button on the side, and you have to push that at the same time that you push the button that's facing you. So the one on the side and the one facing you, push them at the same time, and it releases right here. So to get that back on, I like to have my arm resting on my leg, so I'm kind of supporting it. Press the button on the side, press the button facing you, and you just push it right straight up. I'm also providing a force at the bottom of the pad here, straight up. And it might not make a clicking sound, but what you want to do is make sure that button is not depressed at all, that button has popped back into place, and then make sure you test that yourself so you know that it is secure. So to get into the pacer, what I would suggest, if you have difficulty doing that when the pacer is at full height, you lower the whole frame of the pacer, but then you also lower the seat by pushing the button down here, and you have it around the same height of the seat that the individual is going to be sitting in. So you can have this as a 1 or 2 person transfer depending on the individual. Gait belt might be useful. Have the people that are helping them wide base of support, and you're just weight shifting them. It's not about lifting them, it's about shifting them forward. So have the seat low enough, have their legs out. You are gonna be weight shifting, and you're just gonna transfer them and kind of slide them forward onto the saddle. So make sure you're using your proper body mechanics, and just go ahead, lean them forward and slide them onto the actual saddle. So you can see here, I'm gonna be sitting and my frame is just super low. So I'm gonna go ahead and raise my frame up. You may need to have a person stand on the base of the frame while the other person kind of helps lift it up and push the button. So you're gonna grab hold of the handle, you're gonna raise up the frame, and you can see my person I'm still sitting on the seat. My frame is really high up on my chest, and I'm still in a seated position. So in order to make that better, I'm just gonna move this chair. So once they're still in the seated position, what you're gonna wanna do is maybe lower the frame and then actually like raise up the seat. And what the raising up the seat does is just really pops you up higher so that the frame is at the level of your pelvis, which that is still a little bit low for me. I'm gonna lower my seat. So that you can have your arms in a good position, so your arms aren't out to the side. They're nice and in alignment underneath you, so you can get support through your shoulder girdle. What that also does is when you are walking, if your frame is at the height of your pelvis, that you can just easily move your hips and the walker is gonna move with you. So the first adjustment I'm gonna show you is for the hip corral. The hip corral is this padded bar that goes in the front of your pelvis. The idea is that this hip corral is going to be in alignment with your ASIS, which is your anterior superior iliac spine, which is this bony process in the front of your pelvis. So in order to make that adjustment, you can either push the button on the side, and that raises. You can actually take this off completely. It raises and lowers it. If you have it so low that there's gonna be a plastic bar that's sticking up in the middle, that's too low because they could have that pushing into their bellies if they were to come forward. So I like to have it at least the height of the top so that they're not getting any kind of pressure there. But if it can be resting on their ASIS, that actually is the right height for me. That's the best place. You can also, depending on how much space they need in the front, you can push the little button in the front of the hip corral and bring it forward or back. And it just clicks into places. There's a lot of little adjustments to that. What that allows you to do also is to be closer to the front of the seat versus being a little bit further back. When they're on the saddle, you're actually gonna wanna have their thighs in the curved space in the saddle so that it fits in perfectly there. So they're not too far back on it and getting pressure in different areas or too far forward. So you do want that hip corral to be nice and snug against their body so that you can stick your hand there, but it's also not too tight. So once you have that in position, it's nice, tight, and snug up against their chest or against their bellies, you can go ahead and put your seat on. One of the really nice things that you can have with this pad is that if you have an individual that has some kind of asymmetry of their pelvis, so that say like one side wants to go forward, more forward than the other side, you could actually help pull them back because you have this pad in the front and you have this strap. So if you go ahead and pull one side tighter than the other, it pulls the opposite side back. So that really helps with those individuals that are forward and you want them to come back, or if you need to help compensate for their deformity there and their rotation of their pelvis, that you can go ahead and allow that if that's what's needed. Or you can help correct that just by changing how tight the straps are on this pad that's behind their hips. So as you can see on mine, I have one side a little bit tighter than the other. And you can see it really can help pull something forward. But once that pad is nice and secure and the hip corral is nice and secured against their pelvis, they have great control of just moving their hips to allow the walker to move back and forth. What that allows is to have more control at your trunk without providing extra prompts at the trunk. So if their pelvis is nice and secured, you may be able to get away with just using the arm prompts with the MPS and reduce that prompt of the chest. So the next adjustment, once you have the hip corral in the right place, nice and snug with the pad, you can play around with the adjustment of the seat depth. So the seat depth adjustment is, there is a little button to push in the back that is right underneath the actual seat itself. So the lower one adjusts the height of the seat, and then the one right underneath the seat is a button you push, and that adjusts how forward or how far back. So you may wonder why you have that adjustment. If you have an individual who's an early walker and they're just starting, you may want to start with their pelvis further back so that they can lean forward more onto the arm prompts or the chest prompt, because what that does is brings their weight over the front of their main body of support, so over their legs, so that when they lean forward, they're just using their legs to catch up with their body. You may find that as they become stronger, you can go ahead and bring them back. Ideally, you would like them upright like we walk, and that they have this nice lateral movement instead of always needing to be leaning forward. I want the individual that I'm working with to be able to use those arms to be more upright. So ideally, I would like to have that seat depth so it's more of a neutral position so that their arms can be underneath them. So I also can bring the seat all the way forward. What that does is bring the hips way forward. I may want to bring the hips forward of an individual who has a kyphosis, because if their hips are forward and I open up their chest prompt, it may allow them to open their chest up a little bit more. And so their hips are forward, their back is allowed to kind of come back, and it allows them to be more upright with their head up in order to take some steps. You can also play around with that adjustment of the seat forward and backward with individuals who have extensor tone, or maybe someone who has lower tone. So really play around with that position to see what position is going to allow them to have more forward progression. You may find that if you have their hips forward more, maybe they would be more inclined to step backwards. So really play around with that height. The next adjustment is that tilt of the pelvis, and that adjustment is actually in the curve of the handle. And I find sometimes that if the individual is putting too much pressure on that, it's harder to adjust. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how it can be all the way back into a posterior pelvic tilt. So if you have someone who likes to be back here, this might be where you need to start them to be more comfortable, is in that posterior pelvic tilt. But you can also see that if I'm in a posterior pelvic tilt and my hips are back, if I step, I'm not really going anywhere. And that also puts me in a more seated position on the seat. So again, I'm just kind of hanging out here. But if you can gradually change that angle of the pelvis, bring it forward, it might automatically bring their pelvis in an easier position so their legs are below them and allow them to walk forward. So I'm going to go ahead and tilt it all the way forward to show. It's kind of hard to adjust. The anterior pelvic tilt. So I'm way forward. When I do that, I get a lot more pressure on this front hip corral. I was not locked into place. Actually, I'm not locked into place because I'm too close to the frame in the front. So I'm going to actually move my seat away from the front, change the angle of the tilt again, so now I can be all the way forward. When I'm all the way forward, I'm getting a lot of the pressure in the front and the groin area. I'm putting a lot of pressure on the hip corral, so it's really not as comfortable for me. I would prefer to be in a more neutral position. But for the individual that you're working with, maybe that is not a position that you can get them into. So when you're in this position, it actually puts a little bit of more pressure on your back. And I think you might have to play around with this pad and how tight that is. Or you might even need to play around with the hip corral more if you have your pelvis in an anterior pelvic tilt. So I prefer to have it in a more neutral position for myself. And to me, that is a little bit more comfortable when I'm actually putting some pressure on the saddle. The next thing to show you is this pad between the legs. What that does is it keeps a person from scissoring. I think it is a really great little add-in to this, because I have a lot of students who don't like the thigh prompts, and they're just hard to mess with when you're having other people position an individual in the pacer. So having this pad is really nice. Sometimes if the seat is all the way back, so the seat depth is all the way back, and they're scissoring, you might find that they get caught up on the bolts that are on this metal, and sometimes I may need to add a little pad around the back part so that one, it keeps their legs apart a little bit more, but two, it keeps them from rubbing their inner thigh. But the other solution to that is to actually slide the seat forward a little bit more so that they are rubbing on the actual padded thigh part that goes between your legs. I hope this has been helpful to you. The MPS is a really great addition to the dynamic pacer and actually the standard pacer frame. But again, it doesn't work for everyone. So you may need to use the pelvic support or you may need to use the hip positioner. And those two pieces can be taken off if you're trying to reduce the amount that they're weight bearing on the seat. This one you cannot take off when you're walking like you can the other ones. So you can take it off and put it right back on again as you progress their seating. So please be mindful of the individuals that you use this with versus the other seats. There's so many different options and so many different accessories. I hope this clears up any kind of issue that you might be having with the MPS to help your person that you work with be more functional and more comfortable. Thank you so much. Please check out the checklist that Riften has on their website. There'll be a link on this video. There's a form that you can print off and have very specific adjustments so that if you have to share the piece of equipment between multiple people, that you will know how it needs to be adjusted. But please keep in mind that each day a person may present differently, so that would be a great place to start when you set up the pacer initially, but you still may need to make these little final tweaks of the MPS to get them comfortable and just right. And those little adjustments may take your person from standing and completely sitting on the seat to being able to bear more weight and actually progress themselves forward in walking. Thank you so much for watching these videos, and I hope that you have found them helpful.